Gnosticism believes that there's a universal consciousness and that there are emanations from that universal consciousness, and we are individual units of consciousness. But everything that universal consciousness is enfolded in each and every tiny little part of creation. So that, it's like a holographic effect, like you can reproduce a whole image from a tiny part of it.
And welcome to the Consciousness of the Way. I'm your humble servant and seafood Taoist Master San Qing, and it's another day. I think I'm going for the trifecta of the Gnostic effect of knowing. I want to really welcome to the podcast today an incredible seeker and author, a lawyer, and actually it's interesting, a lawyer. You wouldn't call yourself a barrister or a scholar, being out of London?
I'm more of a legal philosopher than anything else. I have a law degree from the University of London, but my main interest is constitutional law and legal philosophy.
I love it. I love it. And so I want to welcome to the podcast, Adrian. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing very well, thanks. I'm really happy to be with you today to talk about my journey and my experience with Gnosticism or anything else that comes our way or comes up.
Yes, that's what I always welcome, a robust, healthy conversation about just now. So with that said, I'd love you to just share a little bit about yourself leading up to this point today.
Okay, well, I'll get started from an early age. From a very early age, I was exposed to a fundamentalist Christian sect, which was overseen by a very dominant, powerful, charismatic leader who was very persuasive, who claimed to have the truth and to know the truth. And as a young man, I was asking all the big questions, why are we here? Why were we born? Where are we going? What's our purpose? And this individual claimed to have all the answers to that. He ran a liberal arts college, and I went to that college. I graduated with a Bachelor of Arts with a major in theology. It was quite a well-run institution. It had a lot of good professors in history and theology, music, agriculture, you name it. They offered me a job as a minister when I graduated. I didn't last very long in the job because I started having misgivings about the doctrines of the church and the impact that those doctrines were having on people and on their lives. So I kind of, in my writing, I compare it to the Wizard of Oz, written by Frank Baum, because the individual in charge was very reminiscent of that character, the wizard. I call him the wizard. Kind of a blustering, bombastic, domineering, very sure of himself, very definite ideas. And as a young person, you don't know the answers. You just say, oh, this person has these answers. He knows what's true. And so you gravitate towards that. And the story is of, the character Dorothy and the straw man and the tin man, the cowardly lion. They all think to themselves, well, we're not enough. We need someone to tell us what's true, something outside of ourselves to tell us what's true and what's right. For Dorothy, she's saying, well, I'm just a child. What do I know? The straw man saying, I'm stupid, so what do I know? Tin man saying, I don't have a heart, I'm not enough. And the cowardly lion, I don't have the courage. Well, for them, it all turns out to be a sham. And the wizard himself turns out to be an individual who is controlled by external forces. I should mention that Frank Baum was a theosophist. So everything he wrote here was couched in symbolic language, multiple layers of symbolism. We have the Wicked Witch of the East and the West, which is turned out to be Rockefeller and Morgan, and the wizard himself was the President McKinley, just the mouthpiece. So you pull back the curtain, and what you see is something, it's all a sham. He's just a frightened little man, you know. So I think the moral of the story is that we have all the resources within ourselves that we need to access divinity, truth. Truth can be accessed personally and individually in the cooperation of your neighbors, those flawed but wonderful human beings that live next door. Truth is in your own backyard, you know, it's not far away. And when I talk about being disillusioned with the doctrines, Gnosticism refers to a certain kind of knowledge. It's a Greek word for knowledge, but it means experiential knowledge, the kind of knowledge that you actually live or experience. Carl Jung said once, I do not believe, I know. What he meant by that is I have an experience of God. Someone asked him, do you believe in God? And he says, I don't believe, I know. So these are in the realm of these doctrines that the church had, were basically his interpretation of scripture. If you don't hear anything else, it sounds very persuasive, but as you start to hear other things, then you start to realize there are flaws. And so this kind of knowledge, is kind of propositional knowledge or abstract knowledge. That's all very temporary, very susceptible of being overthrown. It has to be held very, very lightly. Always in the back of your mind, well, it could change in the future, or I could move on to something else. The problem with ideology is that it can become too tightly held or too strongly held. And then it becomes like ideological possession, and people become unhinged or deranged almost if they are too attached or too identified to these ideas, as opposed to experience or insight that comes directly from source.
Would that be a little jab at the scientific community, or not? Kidding.
Most definitely. Most definitely it would. Most definitely. Because I was just going to say, I'm not going to hit on the fundamentalist Christians here, because they're not, by no means is my idea of fundamentalism confined to the religious community at all. In fact, what I see going on in the world around me now is a manifestation of it, and makes that experience in the church look like a church picnic.
Right.
So also, speaking of scientism or scientific community, it's a kind of fundamentalist religion. I would define fundamentalism as anything that is like a sacred idea or a presupposition that must not be challenged. Any idea, an abstract idea that must not be challenged. So somebody has an idea that in science, that the only way to experience truth is through the scientific method, and deny completely the supernatural, has started off with a presupposition that the supernatural world does not exist. And that is a form of a kind of militant atheism or an evangelical approach. In fact, our mutual friend James Tunney sent me an email, which I thought was really significant. I have it here. Yeah, the English biologist Thomas Huxley invented the word agnostic in 1869. It means that a man shall not say he knows or believes in anything which he has no scientific grounds for professing to know or believe. James wrote something here. Gnosticism is a valuable counter move to recover what scientism stole. Gnosticism vindicates the subjectivity that supposed objectivity left out.
He's always very poetic. It's a flavor. He puts a little flair into everything. Something so benign look a little closer, and he adds some real vivid sort of expression of what that is. And truly, I mean, I think we've got a mutual consensus here when it comes to, absolute truths of any kind. That that's the red flag for me when someone beats the drum and says, it's not just the way, it's the only way. Problematic, in my opinion.
Sure. Yeah, I agree with you. So he mentioned supposed objectivity. So, that word supposed, they're not really objective, because these things like ESP and psychokinesis and psychic abilities and precognition, all of these things have actually been demonstrated scientifically by people like Dean Radin and thinking of the biologist, Rupert Sheldrake, Dr. Rupert Sheldrake. They have presented evidence, for example, of psychic ability even in animals. And he tried to present this evidence in certain scientific circles, but they say, well, we already know the answer, that it's bunk, so we're not even going to look at your evidence. So that's an example of a fundamentalist approach. That is to say, an idea that you have, a presupposition, an assumption that you have, which you cannot challenge. And if you challenge it, then you become demonized. And that's a form of censorship, because that's to stop you from looking. Because if you look, then you'll become a bad person or a stupid person or an ignorant person or a backward person.
Or
like when I was
a conspiracy theorist.
Another one. Yes, that's a good one. Yeah, that's a way of dismissing people and marginalizing people, shutting them down, shutting them up. Like when I was in the church, there was a history. One of the reasons that I was able to leave was I was a professor of history who left the church and wrote articles and pamphlets and books, basically dismantling some of the stupider doctrines of the church in interpretations. And that person was heavily demonized. So it was a long time before I got around to actually, well, really, I should take a look at it. Really, I should, because by doing so, you were treading on very dangerous ground, or something. But as soon as I did that, the lights just went on. So it was just basically that was one of the things that precipitated my exit.
Yeah. You look at things. I had as I said earlier today, I had a guy that went down the Gnosis alchemical rabbit hole through his life and really embraced an understanding, because within Taoism, a lot of people are like, oh, that's a religion or that's a philosophy. Well, it's an experiential, self-evident now moment. And if you validate it through the visceral experience that you have that is validated by you, that's where we're off to the races. That's where the parallels between a Gnostic sort of viewpoint and a Taoist viewpoint are very similar. And then it doesn't come down to this is the only way up the mountain. Because within Taoism, we understand that you're subject to dualistic duality until otherwise noted. That means that you know what you know, you don't know what you don't know. So until then, you will be subject to up and down, in and out, good and bad, left and right. Now, is that bad that you are immersed in this sort of perception? Absolutely not. The polarizing effects of these things is what makes up what we call, from a scientific perspective, the three-dimensional reality that you're in. But then foregoes the understanding that if for you to perceive a third dimension, you're actually in the fourth dimension. So then we have a whole nother thing. We're going up and around about perceiving what is what isn't. And it really comes down to, in my opinion, if you're thinking, you're not knowing. If you're knowing, you're feeling. If you come from biology, neurology, Scientology, Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Taoism, I don't care what it is, it's an ism of some kind, you become very limited. The lens has to expand, and it has to be the individual's journey of that realization for it to be real. Your truth is the only truth you need to be concerned with. Then people go, whoa, That's a little bit, what kind of power are you giving someone, the idea that they can validate what is real and what is not? That's dangerous. You could have these psychotic, delusional people that are running around saying they're talking to fairies. Well, right now, if you do that and you get a YouTube channel, you're going to make a lot of money. It's a different world order than 30 years ago when I'd have someone come to me, I'm having a psychotic episode, and go deeper into the fundamental layers of these energetic profiles that would represent an entity, a spirit, something else that goes way beyond what this person is perceiving. But don't worry, you're crazy as a shithouse rat, and we need to be concerned by how you're perceiving your reality. These days, the same person with the same issues wouldn't even look to find some Taoist priest that specializes in this stuff. I'd be like, oh, I'm channeling the Palladians. I need to open a YouTube channel. That's what I'm noticing. That's all. It's a different world order, a higher frequency that people are falling into. And from a perspective of just looking at what the Earth is transmitting from a reflection of like a Schumann resonance, there is a fundamental difference in what frequency the Earth is putting out, and it's getting higher. And there's evidence that we're going to get up to 40, 50, 60 hertz, which would be in reflection of the idea that if you are a microcosm of a macrocosm of all is one is all, and the Earth is reflected of your very infrastructure, then this would have an effect on your electromagnetic field, moreover your torus field, which you're transmitting a very similar, if not the same, because the Earth is you, you are the Earth. You have this little magnetic life force that's going on here. And if you tap into that brainwave, guess what? If you're subject to it and you don't go and do anything and you just flow into the synthesis of this wave of resonance, and you are it, then guess what? All of a sudden you're going to be awakened by this conscious, alert awareness of something that really can be quite profound. Or I had a friend on the channel who she reads human resonance. It's sort of her thing. It's a fun time, sort of hobby. And there is an artificial manipulation right now that's bringing it from 7.83, which is a regular, and pushing it into 12, 18 hertz. Now, what would that mean? What do you think, Adrian? The two of us being Sherlock Holmes, Watson type of guys that like to explore and seek for answers, who would manipulate that type of stuff and have a fundamental effect on planet Earth? And if someone's living on that planet, what would that do to the psyche of an individual that has no clue what's going on? I don't know. It's not potentially, it could be problematic. What are your thoughts on that?
You seem to be saying it's the best of times and it's the worst of times. That something is happening. Something's happening in terms of this Schumann resonance that is a positive thing. That is, people are more open to another dimension or another way of experiencing life or experiencing the world, which is a wonderful thing. And it's very close to Gnosticism, because Gnosticism believes that there's a universal consciousness, and that there are emanations from that universal consciousness, and we are individual units of consciousness. But everything that universal consciousness is enfolded in each and every tiny little part of creation, so that it's like a holographic effect, like you can reproduce a whole image from a tiny part of it, or a fractal. The concept of the fractal, which is, in simple terms, the analogy would be a head of broccoli. If you take a little piece of the head of broccoli and look at it under a magnifier, you're going to see something that is looking exactly like the entire head of broccoli. And that's actually a scientific validation in the work of certain quantum physicist David Bohm. Any element contains enfolded within it itself the totality of the universe. And certain poets like William Blake's, to see a world in a grain of sand, or infinity in an hour, heaven in a wildflower. So we are like an expression of the whole. And as we relate more to the whole, our consciousness is expanded.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it sort of goes in with the Taoist understanding, and this is just using it as a reference point. There's the stillness between the breath in and the breath out. We call it the Wu Ji. The Wu Ji is the center point, which would be referred to the mother of all things, the Tao, which is well, I've sort of like looked at it as something beyond the electromagnetic spectrum of this dimension. When you are bringing things or returning things to what we call perfection manifest, that's what it is. Everything that we are perceiving within this materialistic sort of dimension is limited by the manifestation of the individual or the collective. I wouldn't even call it a singular, but if we want to get all scientific-y on us, a singular would be perfection, would be the 0 point, would be the scalar wave, the unified field, method, theory. We get to the theory part, but people get a little bit more squeamish about that when they call it a theory, but then they say, that's it. Hang on a second. Didn't we go down that path? It's a theory, right? And that means that you should be open to a healthy discussion about what the potential of it not being the theory that is the absolute theory of all things, which is where, I find that a lot of people tend to get caught up in that. And even right down to the model of the laws of the universe, the principles. It's a little problematic for me when you're giving it title like that, because truthfully, from my own journey, the universe doesn't have a moral compass. So when we get into the construct of what a human would perceive as their reality, and this is an expression of where they are on their consciousness scale. Hey, I'm in the 3D. This is what I see. This is how it is. The reflection looking back at me is my identity. Becomes problematic in the sense of, well, are you going to break away from the chains of that? And as our dear friend James Tooney would say, and raise yourself to spiritual consciousness, not consciousness in of itself, because that is also a separator. And understanding that, even when we put title to anything, the only time I've ever observed anything that would be considered supernatural or miracle on what people would call the mystic path is the present moment. That's how it works. That's how I get in there. That's how it becomes realized. And that means no place, person, or thing. There's no title. There's no Adrian. There's no San Qing. There's no camera. All things are seamless. That's how you can tap into what I generally give people a dose of, whether it's something that they consider beyond this realm. You tap into that moment. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I totally agree with that. When I left the church, I was very confused. It was a very traumatic experience because your whole belief system is falling apart. So you start to wonder, well, what can you believe? I considered it a license to explore different things, and I explored psychic phenomena. I did work with Reiki healing with a Reiki master. And all of this was done with people that I knew in Sedona, got to know, friends, in a non-commercial way, which was a very privileged situation to be in. I did a sweat lodge with a real native sweat lodge, and sunrise ceremony with the Shoshone people not far from you, near the Death Valley. So I exposed myself to a lot of different things, and some strange things started happening. Strange synchronicities started happening that challenged my conventional notion about reality. What we have come to accept as being reality. For example, on one occasion I was visiting Toronto to take care of my mother, to take her to a specialist. I checked into the hotel room and 323 was on the door. And I thought, oh, that's interesting, because a condo we just sold in Vancouver had 323 on it. So I took my mother to the specialist, and the doctor's suite number was 323. And I thought, okay, this is starting to get a little weird. And then I went to the parking lot, and I noticed the license plate on my father's car was 323. And when I got back home, I mentioned this to a psychologist I know who's open to these things, and wanted to know what she thought of it. And she said, take a look at my license number, 323. Then a little bit later, I was watching a movie, Radio Free Albemuth. It's a movie based on Philip K. Dick novel Vast Living Intelligence System. And the protagonist is struck by a beam of pink light in the middle of the night. And I noticed there's a digital clock right next to him where this beam of light is shining on him. And what time is it? It's 323. So this is strange, you know. And at first, I'll mention another one before I carry on. I mentioned that we were working with a Reiki master who was a personal friend of ours. And on another occasion, I was taking my motorhome up to Toronto, and the alternator belt had broken. I didn't know about it, but it starts running down the battery, and soon it starts sputtering, and I sort of crash land in the parking lot of Walmart in Rumford, Maine. And I said, I'll go in and get a look at a movie in the movie section, bring it back and watch it. And I'm standing in the movie section, and I turn to my right, and there is this Reiki master standing right next to me. I did not know that she had just suddenly moved from Sedona. As far as I was concerned, she was in Sedona, and she moves to Rumford, Maine. There she is standing there. So I'm feeling like I saw a ghost, or, you know, challenging, how could this possibly be? And at first I'm spooked by it, you know, kind of like, this is really weird. Then I decided, well, what do you feel about, what is the first thing that you feel? What is the first impression? Instead of trying to overthink the thing. And with the 323 thing, I think the first thing that I felt about it, let's say, was I'm being observed, or everything that occurs in your life has significance. You have the mother you're supposed to have, you have the friends that you're supposed to have, you have the circumstances. Even the circumstances of your life have intelligence, or there's a meaning or a purpose in it. And when I saw the Reiki master, I thought, or I felt, that she was significant because of the work we had been doing, and that I ought to pay attention to the work that we had been doing and go down that road, continue down that road.
Well, I mean, numerology, if you want to call it that, or just a synchronicity, however you want to put it, there's a rippling effect. This is kind of like the mirroring. If you go deep into any sort of like seeker's understanding of all things above what we perceive right now, in a deeper knowing of what that is in relation to, you know, a mystic's journey, then you start going, well, there's a deciphering method, or, you know, that cringeworthy word that you use, ideology of how things are working, right? Mm-hmm. That's the fear factor. And, you know, from a Taoist perspective, just a little tad bit, you have the numbers, and everything comes in threes. Everything ends up at 9. 9 is the highest number, the most powerful number from a Taoist perspective. And if you look at it from the energetic potential of your dantian, your upper dantian, middle dantian, lower dantian, you're at a 2 where it should be a 3, which would change the architecture and infrastructure of that energetic potential as a reflection of whatever is going on the other side. And I mean, again, it's another another offering of what the potential could be, and that is really for you to determine what that is or not. I mean, it's your what's that old song? It's my party and I'll cry if I want to. You do what you do, you and I do me. But it's always intriguing to go, you know what? Maybe I want to look a little further. So my intuition's telling me to lean a little bit to the right and go a little deeper on whatever this information is, and it gives me insight to what that might be for me. What is resonating with you that would give you the answer to that? Or have you yet found something, or may not have found something that is resonating that would give you an understanding of what that potential is?
Well, as far as the meaning of the numbers themselves, I remember when we got the condo in Vancouver, the realtor said, well, it's a good number, you know, because the Chinese would love your number and they would buy the house or buy the condo. So I wasn't too concerned about the meaning of the number, but the fact that I would get that sequence of numbers over and over again was a challenge to my conventional notion of how the world works, which goes to Gnosticism again, because the Gnostics believe that we live in a computer-generated simulation program, and that events like that are some changing variable within the program. Something's interfering with the program, as they would call it in the movie The Matrix, a glitch in the Matrix. And The Matrix, incidentally, for those who know about it, is a very Gnostic film. It was the Wachowskis who made the film said that it was explicitly Gnostic and also Buddhist. And inherent in the film is that we don't see the real world as it is. We see we see something that is not really real, and that it's kind of a little bit dark, because in the movie, the character is in a pod having his energy drained. And these creatures, these machine-like entities, are creating an illusory environment so that he won't wake up to his real situation, that he's being preyed upon by a parasitic entities. And when he wakes up, it's very traumatic. And Morpheus says some very Gnostic things to him. Morpheus is kind of the person who helps him wake up, and he has a lot of questions. And Morpheus tells him that know who you really are, know who you are. Recover your true identity. There's something wrong with the world. You've known it your whole life. And Neo wants to know if he can dodge bullets, if he learns to become a master. And Morpheus says, once you know who you really are, you won't have to. So yeah. That's a lot of Gnosticism in that film.
Is self-evident, right? It's self-evident. It's evidence-based. It's you come to that conclusion. You realize that everything I need within Taoism, we call it this: let the man who's never left his village, let him know he's seen the world. It's all right here.
Right.
So,
it's all
you don't have to go anywhere.
And I think that's the message of the Wizard of Oz. Find your truth in your own backyard. Find it within yourself. Don't give your power away to some all-knowing, all-powerful wizard, and rely on that experiential knowing that is direct from source. And to look at a little bit of the history of Gnosticism, I think the earliest Christians were shamanistic or mystical in their approach. They got a lot of, as Christianity developed into more of an organized, systematized religion, they got a lot of criticism and persecution from what we would call the Orthodox Church. The Orthodox Church, one particular individual, Church Father Irenaeus, criticized them heavily in his writings. And that's mostly what we knew about the Gnostics is from their critics. And he said, well, every day they produce something new or something unique or something novel. And no one is considered mature amongst them unless they bring forth every day some enormous fiction. And they have nothing to rely upon but their own intuition. And they talk about their feelings, you know, they're relying on just their feelings and their experience. They talk about their experience. And so that begs the question, if they are not to rely on those things, well, what are they to rely on then, according to Irenaeus? Well, the authority of the wizard, the church, the organization. So the church was becoming more organized in its approach. And with organization, I think, comes problems of worldliness, you know, worldly ambition, power, money, wealth, control creeps in. Their way of identifying what a Christian was based on belief. For example, in the book of John, a few of the apostles, 8 or so, claim to have seen the risen Christ and seen him ascend to heaven. And the message is, you either believe what we say or you're damned. And if you do believe what we say, then you're saved. So they're being asked to believe in something that they have neither seen nor heard themselves. Thomas objects and he says, I'm not going to believe it unless I see it. He is rebuked to a certain extent. Christ says to him, you have seen and therefore believed, but blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. Now, when we look at the alternative to that, which is the book of Thomas, Thomas is actually in the Gnostic tradition elevated, like his approach is elevated to that of experience, know your experience or know yourself. And other Gnostics, scriptures say, walk upon yourself as though you were a road, or knock upon yourself as though you were a door. And one of the verses in Thomas is, if you bring forth that which is within you, that which is within you will save you. If you do not bring forth that which is within you, that which you do not bring forth will destroy you. So the importance of finding your salvation within and knowing that you are part of everything, part of the universal consciousness, and that is enfolded in you, and you are just an expression of it. So that's sort of the main criticism that came from the Orthodox side of things. And sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that actually the Gnostics were not critical of their Orthodox counterparts. They just saw it as another side of a coin kind of thing. They said, well, they understand things in an exterior way or an external way. They call it the outer mysteries, but where we understand more the inner mysteries. So they weren't hostile. I think what was happening is that the Orthodox Church was becoming more and more left-brained, male-orientated. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that we've got to balance the two. We've got to have a right wing and a left wing to make the bird fly. And the Gnostics understood that, but unfortunately the favor was not returned. They were heavily persecuted, murdered in large numbers. There was a crusade against the Cathars, a Gnostic sect, over 10 years, the Albigensian Crusade. One city was besieged and 20,000 people, 20,000 Cathars were killed, murdered. One of the clerics said, "Kill them all," which is an example of how ideological possession can really take off when it gets out of control.
Yeah.
And so their works were driven underground, and we didn't know much about Gnostics at all until 1945, when a Bedouin boy uncovered some pots in a cave near Nag Hammadi, Egypt. He broke open the pots and thought, well, this would make nice kindling. Took it home, and they were making a fire out of it. But the uncle came along and said, that could be valuable. And so they called the Cairo Museum, and sure enough, that was the Nag Hammadi library, 52 texts, codices, scrolls, containing a whole range of gospels that no one knew about before, like the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, the Gospel of Judith, the Pistis Sophia. So there's an endless array of gospels. So somewhere along the line, the church fathers got together to decide what would be the word of God. So, well, this one seems to work. Let's throw this one away, throw that one. Oh, that works, but throw that one. Well, how were they doing that? They were basically selecting things that would support the more authoritarian model and throwing away the more mystical, poetic, which they saw as Irenaeus would look at the Gnostics and say, well, that's chaos. That's just chaos, you know. So they wanted something that was unified, one truth, one doctrine. And so you could be clearly identified as being a Christian, simply identified. Do you accept the doctrines of the Nicene Creed? You know, do you accept the church authority? You know, the little checklist going on here, you know. If you met those external criteria, then you're in and you're saved. And you could bring in large numbers of people that way. And it was all a quantitative game too, building something, building an empire and getting it attached to another empire, the Roman Empire, with the same ambition. And the Gnostics, on the other hand, were more like artists. Irenaeus was painting a picture. He was painting a picture, a work of art, presenting it to them and saying, well, this is the only work of art possible. This is the only painting that's possible. So the Gnostics, on the other hand, were, they would receive instruction from, another artist, an experienced artist, but as soon as possible, that person would be expected to paint their own picture, write their own poem, or have their own vision. And that would mean a multiplicity of artworks and things to choose from. And the reason I find that significant is that that process was going on in the same way in my personal experience, being closed off from any other alternative way of looking at things. The more you are exposed, more and more variation, more and more different perspectives, the less likely you are to get your consciousness narrowed or contracted and stuck in one place. And that's the only truth possible.
Yeah, I would have to agree. The story of the Gnostics sound very similar to that of Taoists.
Mm-hmm.
We were always an advisor to the 7 emperors that were consciously acknowledged through Chinese history, not including the Yellow Emperor, who basically downloaded the Chinese culture, Chinese medicine, internal alchemy, with his whispers from the universe, laying magnetized to the earth for 18 days and 18 nights, and basically was downloaded everything that we know today as the Chinese infrastructure. And so through history, I think it was the 3rd or 4th emperor in China was like, hey, whoa, hang on a second. This Taoist stuff is a little too problematic. We got some free thinkers. We got alchemists that are doing crazy things and superhuman things. We use them as our advisors. We harness their magical abilities to conjure and do all this stuff. Off with their head. We need to,
Really?
we need really, yeah. And so they started to create confusion within the Chinese communities by blending Confucianism, Taoism, Buddhism, and mishmashing it, and then having this really weird direction. And of course, in the end, modern expression of Chinese culture in the last 100 years, we had the misfortune of being entertained by a megalomaniac by the name of Mao, who created a genocide that quite frankly makes other parts of history look like a walk in the park. He murdered over 60 million of his own citizens.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's pretty epic. That seems to be glossed over. And even to this day, as we're talking on high technology things or using cell phones, the psychometry behind this, if you sat there and transmitted what was going on, you wouldn't want to own this phone because it came on the back of or the life of some poor SOB that got 3 grains of sand before he had his head bashed in because he wasn't working fast enough. Oops, was I a little bit too personality? This is just for all the OGs. This is my personality, and guess what? It's okay. I can cry if I want to, and I like chocolate, and I like Netflix, and I like driving my side by side in the desert. That doesn't have anything to do with my ability to tap into the now. But with all jokes aside, that's problematic. And I think that the reality is when you find people that are in a position of power and they come to realize that a lot of these sort of viewpoints of reality that have been mastered over thousands of years and handed down, when they identify that this could possibly set the people free, we need to crush it. We need to dilute it. We need to manipulate it because that's not. We can't have people remember who they are. That's a problem. That's
and so they're very willing to use the otherworldly, supernatural, miraculous gifts of those people, but they don't want. They want to hold that close. They don't want to let that out.
Right. And I mean, really,
they want to maintain a system of control. It goes back to the scientism. The scientism wants to tell us that the only way of having truth is through science, which itself is an unscientific statement. And so they're sort of trying to drive out of us all those gifts and put them underground. And but at the same time, while they're doing that, they're practicing something else. They are, invoking entities or doing magic, and so it's a double doctrine, I think. On the one hand, they're expressing this so-called science. On the other hand, bringing in technology transfer. There's some thoughts out there that they use invoking of entities to enable high technology transfer.
Yeah, 100%.
And to build out their transhumanist, globalist empire. And speaking of Mao, Mao was about wiping out everything traditional, to wipe the slate clean, so then they can write anything on a clean slate that they want to. And they're doing something similar, wiping out, as James points out, back in the 1920s, they realized they were going to have to change their strategy to wipe out the family, wipe out the nation, wipe out religion. And then they could replace it all with something that is radically different, a radically different form of globalism, of control that's based on, as Churchill said, the empire of the mind, or mind control, to mind control the population and control them in that way. And the technology will give them perfect knowledge. Like Mao and Stalin did not have perfect knowledge. That's why one of the reasons it all fell apart, because they try to run everything centrally, but they don't have enough information. So it all goes wrong. You know, they start producing the wrong things, and bridges going nowhere, and cities that no one wants to live in, you know, and so on. So, but they think that with perfect knowledge of everything and everybody and artificial intelligence, they can exercise this total control and create for themselves some kind of a technological immortality. They want to stay here, it seems. They want to stay in this third dimension. They don't want to leave it. They just want to make it work and give themselves, they've cut themselves off from source. And that's very much part of the Gnostic mythology. So they become parasitic because they have to get their energy from us. They need us. They need us to get on board with their agenda and to participate with our creative energy, our imaginative function. According to the Gnostic mythology, these beings, they lack empathy. There's a passage in the Secret Gospel of John. They sought to overpower humanity in their psychological and perceptual functioning, which is mind control. For they saw that human thinking was superior to theirs, for their own structure is without divinity. So the Secret Book of John elaborates on this to quite a large extent. There are these beings who need to parasite because they've cut themselves off. They lack this imaginative, creative function, which we have. So if they can get us on board, much as in the same way that when in the church that I belong to, all of our youthful energy, all of our ambition was being transferred out to that person, what they wanted to do, what they wanted to build. You know, we weren't working on our own vision or our own, and that's what's happening now on a massive scale. And it's quite awe-inspiring to see this sort of playing itself out on a civilization-wide basis, something which seemed very obscure at the time. So they need to get us on board. They need us participating. They need our permission. I believe that we need to give them our permission. They always tell you ahead of time that the best source of information about what's going on is the cabal itself, because they will tell you, which I find very curious that they keep telling us. I think it's because they want us to tacitly approve. They want us to agree to something. They're trying to get us into some kind of a pact. The moment we decide to leave this arrangement, then they're finished, because they don't have this. They lack, according to the verse, it says they lack this quality of divinity, which is the creative function. They can imitate, but they cannot create, and they're perfect imitators. There's a word for it in the Greek. It's pneuma. Forget it just for a minute. It'll come to me. Anti-maimon pneuma. That's the word. And pneuma means spirit. Maimon means mimic or imitate. Anti means to mimic something, such as progressivism, you mimic it, or Christianity, you mimic it, and then you twist it or turn it upside down. Anti. So killing 20,000 people in a day, you know, the church, that's anti-Christian, upside down Christian. And so-called progressivism, they're turning it upside down and using it as a kind of mask of piety to mask what's really happening. So that little bit of, from the secret gospel of John is what they call Sethianism. It's a pre-Christian form of Gnosticism. And I would say Gnosticism, there's a lot of differing ideas, a lot of differing groups, but you could identify certain themes, I think, and then you have a lot of variation on themes. One of the themes is, as I mentioned, the simulation program, the false reality, a little bit of it from Plato's analogy of the cave dwellers with their backs to the opening of the cave see the shadows on the walls, and they think that that's the reality because they never turn around and look at the mouth of the cave. Something like that. I think Gnosticism drew something from Plato. The false reality, I think the divine feminine was a big thing with them. That makes sense because we think of the feminine qualities being intuitive, empathetic, creative. So Mary Magdalene in the Orthodox Gospels has a fairly minor role, whereas in the Gnostic Gospel, she's a very important figure. And in the Gospel of Philip, we hear a description of the other apostles, including Peter, being rather upset with Jesus because he seemed to be overly regarding Mary Magdalene as opposed to them. They were jealous. And there's even a verse that even hints at a romantic relationship. It said that Jesus and Mary Magdalene would frequently kiss each other on the mouth. And this is in the Gospel of Philip. So it brings in a kind of idea of the spiritual experiences being related to romance, like the medieval troubadours, passion, a passionate or ecstatic experience, a bridal chamber. All of that kind of thing was kind of diminished in the Orthodox view.
You know, it's amazing how we remind people that, you know, from within Taoism, we always use this expression: if you have to learn it, you do not know it. If you know it, you do not have to learn it. It's just, it is. It's this present moment. It's a truth that is realized from those very words.
Would you mind repeating that for me?
If you have to learn, yeah, if you have to learn it, you do not know it. If you know it, you do not have to learn it. And so that resonates in the core of you. Just the words itself create and emanate an energetic charge, because you know that's true. You know that everything comes from here. And so within, I think this brings a really good point. Jade Emperor, one of my teachers, he always reminds me, all thoughts of your mind are not yours. And people are like, whoa, well, whose are they? Well, I hate to do this to you. Unless you're in a certain place, I can create a thought that you will think you generated. And then people are like, no, you didn't. I'll write down a color or something like that. I'll put it on a piece of paper and I'll be like, what color are you thinking of? And they'll be like, red. And then I'll show them the paper and go, holy shit, how did you, it's just, how dense are the constructs of your ability to project those and emanate them at a higher resonance. And it all depends on what you're capable of accessing that makes it possible. And so when you're referencing the idea of, quite frankly, I'll just put it out there, this, you know, world global psyop, which is really kind of like where things are going, it's problematic when people don't have a belief system. And what better way to shake up the infrastructure if you can look to your partner and realize that, you know what, my partner and I are of the same sex, and I don't like the idea of reproducing because society has given me this message that I need to stay where I am and be in the cult of personality that tells me that this is a movement, this is a belief system, this is where I need to be, and reproduction is not an option for me. I've been swayed to believe that. Now, why do I mention that? Because I couldn't care less about what someone does in their personal life. Yet there is an onslaught and a very sobering insertion of ideals within material that is being exposed and given to new generations that are not, they think they're free thinkers, just like they would think that P. Diddy and Vanilla Ice were original composers that knew how to create phenomenal music that no one had ever heard before. Now, you'd have to rewind in history, but this is the whole problem. We want to forget history, want to forget what has happened before us, the generations that have handed down this very experience. And for all those people that don't know, Vanilla Ice ripped off a really beautiful song that I love that was composed and created by two incredible original musicians, Freddie Mercury and David Bowie. Even they're questionable in their own psychoses on the way out, but it's just another form of history that we're trying to get at, ladies and gentlemen, and realizing that this is being pushed out. And, Gnosticism, Taoism, any type of ism, there is a question mark. You go through this in the history of the world. It's like we go through cycles, spirituality, atheism, religion, and we're going hard on destroying religion right now. And I understand that there is definitely organized religion, which is just an absolute terrible idea. Yet some people are in it. Some people are getting what they think is a good shake of the stick. But the more and more, like yourself, through your own admission, through your own journey, it was problematic when you started to look a little deeper that this was, again, a situation just like the Jade Emperor said, all thoughts of your mind are not yours. Yet, hang on a second, I'm in this sort of like grinding sort of process of a week-to-week worshiping something that is going to give me an answer if I talk to this guy on a pedestal that claims that he has the connection to God or Jesus or whatever, and I can't possibly get there. I have to reference this catalyst, this person, this individual. Yet you had it within you. You just have to. It's like the placebo effect. Why do they measure things comparatively to the placebo effect whenever they're doing any blind studies? What's the point of it? Why do you need to measure the idea of the power of the mind, the power of suggestion, that we even need to go there if it is absolutely garbage, trash, zero? Because every situation, if you look closely at the data, the power of the mind is stronger than anything else and has a fundamental effect that is exponential. I mean, we're talking like some blind study might get 20% or 5% or a response, and then placebo is like an 80, 90% valid responsive results. So now we get to the free thinker, the idea of the free thinker, the Gnostic, the Taoist. I really like the idea of knowing thyself. I always have. Maybe it's an intuitive thing. That's what it is. I'm a little bit more divine feminine, perhaps, whatever it is. And I think, that's sort of like an interesting identifier recently. I've heard a lot more of that, and you've given me origins of where that came from. But it seems to be a big thing to be able to separate whether you're a divine masculine, a divine feminine. What does that mean? Well, as a Taoist, it's just yin and yang, my friend. And you can go a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, or if you're in the dead center, you will be able to know everything because that's the present moment. And it gets expressed in so many different ways. And when you identify with it through your sort of like, whoa, hang on a second, this religious thing is it's not working out for me. I need to look a little further. I need to go a little farther. I need to get out of this little box that I'm in and discover this wide, wide world out here that happens to, literally be abundant, timeless, endless, limitless, infinite. And it all just starts with you. And I love the fact that you use the Wizard of Oz as an example. You're actually the second person that I've met that uses the Wizard of Oz. The last guy was a father, I think he was a Catholic priest. And he used the Wizard of Oz analogy and paralleling it to the experience that we're having and how that really works. I mean, I think I'm a fan of Star Wars. That kind of works for me. The Empire, the Rebels. Where are we at? We're in this dual sort of like scenario until otherwise noted, and there are facets of that diamond that go deep. That can be all different types of like understanding of what the true nature of reality is right now. And as long as you're seeking, elementary, my dear Watson, it kind of becomes a journey that can be very fulfilling, very whole.
Yes. Speaking of intuition, when I first arrived at the college, my intuition told me something wrong here. The problem was it was too quiet a voice, perhaps, or I had been told not to trust it, that any suspicion of dear leader would be the work of the devil or something like that. So it becomes a process of it's like a fruit that's ripening on the vine, like it's eventually it just sort of falls of its own accord one day. The cup is just full, and that's enough. I was very identify a lot with the Exodus myth because I think people actually prefer or seek their slavery. They want to be slaves because then life is predictable. You know what you're supposed to do. They tell you what you're supposed to do. And you get all your needs met. One day you've had enough and you say, well, I'm going to walk away. I'm just going to walk out that door. The happiest day of my life was when they fired me. I was jubilant. It was like a big weight had been lifted. But then you're faced with the wilderness. You're faced with there's no food in the wilderness. There's dangerous things in the universe. You don't know where to go. So the Israelites were wandering for 40 years around and around and around, thinking that they should go back or find something else. That happens to a lot of people who go through that experience. They replace it with some other different version of the same thing. So it will change its outer appearance, but it'll be another version of that same phenomenon. So I really related to that. And another interesting synchronicity was when we were doing one of these healing sessions. We would often do little readings for each other, whatever came up. And this girl says to me, how is it that you don't trust the spirit? I go, okay, I'm going to give that some consideration. And she's probably right. And I go home and I sometimes do this crude form of divination, which is just open a book and see what comes up, So I opened a book and my eyes fell on a verse in Psalms. Remember all his marvelous works was the verse. Closed up the book, tried another reading, opened it up to a verse in Chronicles. Remember all his marvelous works. And the context of it was that it was a song that was being composed, and it was being composed in the context of the Exodus. Remember all his marvelous works. So this was a song that King David was composing. The works being that in the desert they were provided for. In the desert they had guidance, you know, a pillar of fire by night, cloud by day. They were fed manna from heaven. They had protection. They were being provided for supernaturally. And the song was just to remind them of that. Similarly, when I left, I was psychologically broken by the whole thing, and I did not know how I was going to make it. But the moral of the story, I think, would be when you do the right thing, the universe comes to your aid. And when the time is right, you know, and everybody has to make that decision for themselves. I'm not asking people to do things stupidly or precipitously, but there will come a time if you're into some job that you hate, that's enslaving you, you might think you need to hang on to that thing. When the time is right, when you walk away from it, sometimes you need to kick the door down, but get out at all costs. Then you will receive the assistance that you need, I believe.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was thinking too when about my experience with the wizard. For a long time, I was angry. I was very angry because I thought that he had taken advantage of our youthful credulity for his own purposes and wasted a lot of our youthful energy. But then I began to think differently about it. I began to think that at some level, as I was mentioning about the Exodus story, perhaps we want that. So if we want something, maybe somebody like the wizard shows up, you know, because that's where we are, you know. So do we blame that person? Well, we don't blame anyone. We don't blame ourselves because we were just kids at the time, virtually. You don't blame anyone, but it seems like I don't know what you think about this, but it seems like the world is somehow reciprocal to us. It sort of reflects back to us our own psychic content in a way. And there's even a poem about that. Or no, it's a verse in, there's a poem about it, but there's a verse in the Gospel of Thomas. The kingdom of heaven is spread out upon the earth, but you do not see it. So it's there, but it's our level of consciousness that is not sufficient to realize it. So it's like the universe is reflecting back to us where we are in consciousness. Would you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. I mean, it refers back to your observation of fractal patterns, this whole thing where, you know, I mean, we're looking at it within a Taoist model. It starts with matter, qi, shen, wuji, and then the mother of all things, which would be the 5 stages that are reflected to the 5 elements that we use within a Taoist model, and they're all reflecting each other. So within a very powerful incantation that we use, which is basically the incantation is this: a power abundant in its giving you will receive, unifying the body with the spirit with the energy, bringing heaven to earth, transcending all is one, one is all, revealing perfection manifest. That is your gift. That is your offering. That is your gift. That is your offering. That is your gift. That is your offering. And so when it becomes sort of like self-evident and experiential from an incantation level where that energy is imprinted and it permeates through all fields, the matter is reflectant of the chi is reflectant of the shen is spirit, and that is reflectant of the stillness, which is all things, which is another representation of the mother, the Tao, being, now. And then that has a rippling effect. If it comes from a neurological aspect or a numerology aspect, it's a mirroring effect.
A mirror. That's the word that came to me too. The life is a mirror.
Yeah. So
it's
from
reflecting
neurology,
back to us.
Yeah. So from a neurology aspect, if we want to whittle it down to something a little bit more elementary in the sense of a humanist acknowledgement of neuroplasticity, the mirror neurons that you have at the base of your brain is helping you reflect everything within your reality. And so you can now replicate it instantaneously, which then goes deep into what Taoists use as mirror magic, or moreover, the understanding that there's the polarizing effects, the opposites of those things are the same, are being present in the very moment that you're in. So when you're looking at something like numbers, we look at the highest point. The highest number within Taoism is 9. And when you look at that, it's 3 threes. Everything comes in threes. Everything is energy, spirit, energetics. So, like, let's, for example, what is it? The Father, the Spirit, the Father, and the Holy Ghost. Within Taoism, it's the supreme purity, jade purity, highest purity, the keepers of the cosmos, the creators of the cosmos, the very essence and reflection of the mother, which is another facet. And so you can look at these threes. They're evident in everything that we do. And they always come back to the number of 9, which is the highest point, reflected on human life. How long does it take to create that? And that would then go back to, all puns aside, the center point, which is the Big Bang. Geez, what does that even mean? But from a Taoist perspective, we take something that we call a scepter, a Ryu, a Ru Yi, that is formed in the shape of a uterus, and we use that to tap into the mother. And that's the mother of all things, not the father, not the cousin, not the in-between. And that's our realization. That is then referenced to yin energy. And then you look at it and you go, hang on a second, this is starting to make sense. What does this all mean? All is one, one is all. Everything is this present moment. And so from an alchemical perspective, you start getting into the mercury, the magnetism of that, the separation of electromagnetic, or the merging of the two, the conscious and unconscious. We reveal all is one, one is all, and we're off to the races. And you tap into this thing called life force, chi, from a quantum model, the 0 point, the scalar waves, the unified theory, field theory. I mean, it keeps building on itself, and you start getting evidence-based stuff all over the place and go, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, it's in everything. As that fractal observation you were speaking of, you look at that, and that goes right down to the cell, the human cell. And so I've got students. I have students that have PhDs, they're doctors, lawyers, psychologists, psychiatrists, whatever they are. And they all been using the methods that I have trained them in for the alchemical processes of Taoism for many years, some of them 10 and 20 years. And one of them has a PhD. They had a research paper that they were requested to do on what's in the nucleus of a cell. And he comes back to me. He's like, Shifu, you're not going to believe it. Oh, my goodness. And I'm like, what? You wouldn't believe what I found in the nucleus of a human cell. And I said, please tell me. So to give reference point to the audience, within Taoism, we have this, what we call the observation of the death of a star, the rising of the red phoenix, and the evoking of black hole energy within the middle dantian that accesses the 81 chambers, black to white to void to yin to yang to all things. You activate this, it's super potent and gets you right to the point of turning into Harry Potter wizardry. It's a alchemical process. And so what is the super glue behind the presence of theory about the entanglement of the quantum model? It's black hole energy. It's in everything. And so he comes to me and goes, "You wouldn't believe what I found in the nucleus of a human cell, Jiffu." What? Black hole energy.
Wow.
Pick it up.
Yeah.
And he just went. And so we keep getting these validations and conversations like the one we're having today. The insight that you have, the insight that I have, the sharing, the raising of the spiritual conscious collective, as James Tooney would say. This is what we're speaking of, and it's self-evident. And that's the stuff that gets really exciting, because when I teach these processes, it's about developing a result for yourself now. And that means it's not just some conceptual foofy. Just do this for a couple of years, get back to me. I know. I'm the teacher. Relax. I know. No, within Taoism, the student is the teacher is the student. The second you stop that, you're done.
Interesting, because the Gnostics had a different form of organization. They didn't have much of an organization, but they would take turn being bishop, for example. So they didn't have a permanent bishop. They were just sharing with each other their visions, their dreams, their revelations, and so on.
Yeah. And you know,
so learning from each other.
Yes.
Like the ending to The Wizard of Oz. You know, they learned that their best comfort is from their immediate neighbors leaning across the garden fence. You know,
right? The mirror. You are me. I am you. What am I afraid of? So
and all your resources, all the resources you need are within you. The whole cosmos is within you. The whole of universal consciousness is within you. And it's like you could go on an inner journey that would be the same as the Starship Enterprise exploring the cosmos. You know, you'd go on an inner journey that would be just as exciting, full of wonders and mysteries and to be solved and so on.
And that's exactly what happens when you go on those journeys, especially with me. People always go, "Oh, look, I had this, Sifu, Jiao Fu, however you want to call me, whatever it is. I had this moment where I took this, I was on a psychonaut. I went out there and I took LSD, I took mushrooms, I did this, I did that." I said, "So how was it?" "Problematic." I'm like, "Really? How's that?" "Because now I'm here because I can't do it myself." "Oh, welcome. Come on in. I'll show you a DMT experience that lasts you 3 days that you create yourself." So, you know, it all has to do with understanding how these things build on themselves, and that self-evidence will come from 100% consciousness, spiritual consciousness, as James would say, 100%. And that means that that's your default. So within Taoism, we use the model: concept, consciousness, knowing, unconscious knowing, and then being one with all things. And then rinse, cycle, and repeat. And you keep adding that up, so that magnifies itself within the three properties of platinum, gold, and silver, and it transmutes up to the 9th level, and then you repeat it all over again, going into the center of 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 the center. Was that 9? Of the center of the center of the center. And there you have it. And that power is within the center of all things. And the strange thing is when you master that, you will know. It's not I think maybe, someone gave me this practice. I don't know. When you do it, you will turn into a supernatural, superhuman, mystical unicorn. And that's from your own acknowledgement, your own cultivation, your own practices. And that's why I believe most people gravitate to the Taoist alchemical process, because very few people have that access. And that's fundamentally from both our emissions of history, destroying this material that has been handed down from generation to generation, and people are not able to find the real stuff. They get this fragmented rubbish, as I would put it, that gets out there, and someone gets a couple of bits here and there, and they don't have the information to follow through and give someone a grip of what is going on. They sort of, it's almost like an apparition. It just disappears. It's like an illusion. It's like an oasis, which could possibly support the holographic model of the quantum. Yet I'm talking more of something that you can create that's repeatable, that then validates the human's cycle that they have to feed. Part of the human expression, part of human condition is this hetero action of what you start, you must finish. And so when you have to get over that process, and the more you become spiritually conscious, these types of things become uneventful and unnecessary, because you resonate at a level where everything is energy. Energy has a vibration. A vibration, there is a frequency to that vibration. If you resonate at that frequency of that signature, it will be yours. And that would come from sort of like the peddling of the secret and manifestation masters all over the world. And quite frankly, I just had this conversation with someone, and the reason why so many people were disappointed and just disheartened by that, with the premise that they were going to manifest $1 million in a Ferrari in their driveway in 24 hours, was the very understanding that they did not give them a clear understanding. It is a monologue, not a dialogue. And so when you offer something where you go, what are your values? Oh, here we go. You're going to go down the rabbit hole. You're never going to realize it. It's never going to resonate for you, because you're stuck there. And so the monologue, in my opinion, is the true key to all of this in the present moment. And people get stuck in that dialogue. What say you?
Yes, I forgot what I was going to say, but it's like when you talk about the secret. So, God give me a motorcycle, or a new house, or it seems like very low level magic. And it's kind of an imposition of your will, as opposed to thy will be done, or in cooperation with universal consciousness. And
no, go ahead.
Yes, it's like a kind of low level magic, or and there was a prayer by Marcus Aurelius. He said, certainly we can get answers to prayers, but God give me a new motorcycle. But a better prayer would be, God help me not to want one, or not to desire one.
Yeah, I mean that kind of goes back to this idea that we need to be restricted and limited to what are the fundamentals of our road to virtue. Within Taoism, you look at this stuff, and if I'm doing what I would call a psychic reading, where I'm reading the energy centers of someone, it gives me their mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual state in about 30 seconds, just by being able to see the information, the colors, the energy. It's very easy to read someone's auric field, which tells me everything I need to know about them. And that's where they go, WTF, how did you know that? You don't know me. You met me 30 seconds ago. How would you have a clue about anything? And it's just, I'm observing. And I'm not looking for the approval of the individual telling me I'm the next coming of Merlin the wizard, or I'm, the Grand Poupard and, Jesus Christ Superstar. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm just using the methods of training that were taught to me to observe and see and receive the information from source. And so that's right there in front of you. And then, so, we get to sort of like this group think or mob mentality or psychosis or psyop that we referenced before. And, hypnosis is an interesting entry level to that, a very sort of like entry level sort of basic understanding of how to access the unconscious. And it's been around for thousands of years. And sometimes I like leaning on it to show people that it is the now. And then they get freaked out. And so, living out here in Nevada or Las Vegas, I'll go down to the strip quite often with my family, and we'll play what we call Street Magic Day. And you just walk up to people that are in groups that are having a good time and they all want to just enjoy themselves. And you ask them, have you ever felt bliss and ecstasy in a fraction of a second? And they're like, no. And I said, would you like to? Yes. And sleep. And they're like, their friends are freaking out because they're thinking they're getting ready for this experience. And through the linguistics, I've already changed their actual state of awareness and access their unconscious before they even finish the sentence. They're already standing and they're passed out, and their friends are videotaping this going, oh, how did you, what the? And I'm like, now let's just give a structure. What is it that you want to see? So, okay, let's do this. This is always fun. I'm going to erase their name. I'm going to take their wallet and keys. I'm going to wave it in front of their face, and I am going to be Justin Bieber. And their friends are like, I can't wait to see this. And wake. And they're like, I'm like, do you see anything? Are you missing anything at all? By the way, what is your name? And their friends are like, oh, this is really happening. And I'm like, are you missing anything? Anything at all? And they're like, you know what? Where is my wallet and keys? I don't know. Where is it? And then at that point, I notion a little deeper into their unconscious, and it's like, boom, over here. And they like go, Justin Bieber. Oh my goodness. Can I get an autograph? And so this is just a state of consciousness, ladies and gentlemen. People need to realize that. And then in the same fraction of a second, and remember. And they're like, oh, I'm embarrassed. I can't believe this just took place. This is amazing. This is incredible, because this is just a state of awareness and you can access it at any point. I think that people just don't understand that this is going on right now. And that would be also in the hands of people that could potentially be nefarious in their intention and what they want to do and how they want to manipulate people. Now, if I can teach my children, out of 6 of my children, 5 of them know how to do it, and the youngest is 3. So, that's always the entry level. I like to start them with hypnosis, and then we get into deeper levels of remote viewing and, divination, as you would put it. I just put it under the category of ideomotor response, which happens to go into a deeper notion of divination tools, pendulums, tarot cards, dowsing. I teach people body dowsing. So you are the tuning fork. So you can identify with your eyes open, ley lines, power centers, vortices. And this is just a trained behavior. This is just a skill that you learn. And Taoists, in my opinion, I'm a little biased. It might be an ideology, but it's repeatable. And if I can show people this over and over again, I'm sold on this method of understanding. And it's not the ultimate. It's not the truth to all things. It just happens to be a method that I find very effective of teaching people how to remember who they are. And when they do that, then all bets are off. They can use that foundation or structure of cultivation to continue their path down the journey of whatever it is that they do. In most cases, people change their viewpoint of what they perceive as reality. They don't stick in the same lane. They go off in other states. Some may go, listen, this is answering all my questions, and I want to really go deep on Taoism. Or moreover, I just love the way their cultivational practices are repeatable and they get me the result I'm looking for: clairvoyance, mediumship, channeling, physical healings, manifestation, whatever it is that you're looking for. These are this sort of paranormal phenomenon, parapsychologists deep diving into states that are merging the intellect and the intuitive, realizing that all things are now. And so we go on this path. But the hypnosis part is an interesting gateway, an entry level for anyone to get started, to understand that you can change the trajectory of anything in your timeline, in your lifeline, instantaneously, accessing, all brainwaves from a neuroplasticity or a scientific perspective. Once you are all conscious and you are no longer unconscious, all bets are off. So you can access alpha, delta, theta, epsilon, and from a gamma brainwave, you can alter things. And to the better judgment of the higher resonance, affect change for the better of the human existence, and understanding that, when I resonate this high, I'm not deluded, or as my dear friend Martin, a Buddhist monk, would call, I'm not using the dukkha, the distortion, to give me this realization. I'm able to be this present moment and not be distracted with an emotional content. What are your thoughts on all that?
Yes, well, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, isn't it? I mean, it's the result that you get that validates it. For example, when I stopped being angry with the wizard, not a pleasant emotion to be angry all the time. So I came up with this insight that perhaps I want the wizard. Perhaps I need the wizard at that time in my life. So they stop blaming, and you take responsibility for your reality. And there is a poem by William Blake. If the doors of our perception were cleansed, then we would see everything as it is, which kind of goes back to the Gospel of Thomas as well. We would see everything as it is infinite, for man has closed himself up till he sees all things through the narrow chinks of his cavern. So we're seeing the world through a narrow, contracted consciousness. If the doors of our perception were cleansed, if we saw the wholeness, if we recognized our wholeness, then everything would appear infinite. Like we have, there's lots of things that we're not conscious of that are happening anyway. Our hair is growing and we don't know about it, and we cut ourselves and it heals without us. So there's a lot of things going on that we just don't know about.
Until otherwise.
Yeah. So there's a lot we don't know, but a lot that we can experience. There's a beautiful verse in the New Testament. There's Jesus heals a man blind from his birth, and the Pharisees come up and they keep asking him all these questions. How could a man who is a sinner do this? And they keep badgering him, and he finally says, I don't know the answers to any of these questions. I just said, all I know is first I was blind and now I see. And it's that kind of knowledge that where the rubber hits the pavement. Or the story of the Apostle Paul, who was many believe he was a Gnostic, and I totally agree with that, because he was at one point in his life. He called himself a Pharisee of the Pharisees. He had very definite ideas about religion, much as I did in my past. And he even caused Christians to be imprisoned and killed for their religion, for his religion. He didn't change his idea or his doctrine. What happened is he had an experience on the road to Damascus. He was taken up to the third heaven, and a vision told him to call no man common or unclean. So he comes back from that a transformed person. And he starts, a man who once said, I have a very clear idea of what's right and what's true. Then he starts saying things like, he who thinks he knows nothing as he ought to know. But he was talking about that doctrinal, provisional, ideological knowledge, not the experiential knowledge. Where there is knowledge, it will vanish away, that kind of provisional knowledge. And I am determined not to know anything, is another thing that he said.
Right. That, I mean, it's really fascinating how that echoes through all states, which is really what consciousness is, or spiritual consciousness is. It echoes through everything. And so, the Jade Emperor always reminds you, when you accept you know nothing, you know everything. And so when you hear that, you're like, why does that resonate with me? Because
Yeah.
And that's where if you're thinking you're not knowing, if you're knowing you're feeling, right,
You're
comes
thinking
back.
you're not knowing. If you're feeling, you're knowing.
Yeah, if you're thinking you're not knowing, if you're knowing, you're feeling.
If you know it, you're feeling. That's right. And that's
feeling.
Something that's what Irenaeus criticized the early Gnostics for, that they were depending on their feelings. It was all their feelings. That kind of thing is administratively unworkable, as far as he's concerned. It's not something you can work with if you're building an empire, kind of thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, the catalyst is, I always tell people, if you're emotional, you're suggestible. That's all it takes for me to get into your unconscious about a fraction of a second. And then all of a sudden, all thoughts of your mind are not yours, yet you think they are. And I can show you they're not. So that's where emotional content needs to be identified, and it needs to be really seen for what it is, which is a tuning fork of the human within their own journey of their realization of what that means in this nature of reality, some of your life experiences. And that is really a reflection of emanation from a universal level, which is sort of like the radiating waves of energy that are transmitted from the earth, which come in what we've identified as a Schumann resonance. And really, emotions are that on a much bigger scale, because you are a micro of a macro. And so when you start to tune that up and you get into that high resonance, all of a sudden, everything is an expression of this oneness, this now, this perfection, the very moment, this very present moment. They call it the present, the gift. The gift is the offering. And, when you get there, you will know it. There is no in between. You will feel it. And feelings are not emotions, and emotions.
I was going to ask you that. Yes. Can you explain the difference?
Yeah. So
from a Taoist perspective?
From a Taoist perspective, the ingredients of your reality come down to three things: thoughts, feelings, and emotions. That's it. That's the sum of everything. That's it. That's the sum of everything. The be all or end all. A thought evokes an emotion triggers a feeling. And so a lot of people are like, I need to take my microscope to get down there, because as far as I'm concerned, an emotion and a feeling are the same. Oh no. One is in order of the other. And when you understand that, it is fundamental to your realization of the now. And so what happens is that your past, present, and future are basically founded on thoughts, feelings, and emotions. Everything that you do is a thought, feeling, and emotion right here, right now. If I tell you to go F yourself, you're going to have an emotional response that is going to be visceral, and you're going to want to possibly give me your version of what that might mean. And so that has an evoking response internally in your little macro of your micro, and it evokes all these biochemical responses that lead to our chemical responses. And if you allow the emotion and turn into the feeling, and it can just start with the seed of a thought. You don't even have to get to the emotion and the feeling part. You can just stay in the thought. And if you actually erase the emotion and feeling, the thoughts of what is past turn into wisdom. They're not something that you keep recalling, and they become an anchor, an albatross to this very reality. And you have what is considered deja vu, or a Groundhog Day that you can't get out of, because the same thing happens every day. You go to work, someone pisses you off, you get angry. Anger is an incredible emotion to create a delusion, the idea that you're in control when you are very not in control. You are out of control, yet because you have this sobering, razor-sharp intention that you hate that place, person, or thing, it drives you to be more clear in your mind than you ever have before. But what happens is when that emotion wears off, the feeling that was created by that, which gives you a certain response. So that anger to some people might mean razor blades and bunny rabbits, and they get completely high on anger, and they've given it a catalyst of the feeling that evokes a euphoric, because you can train someone to feel anything that they want, however they want, within anger. You ask yourself, what does a boxer feel when they step into the ring? What does a MMA fighter, what does an athlete feel? It comes from an emotional state that was triggered by a thought that gives you the very state you're in. And so all these things can be basically commandeered by understanding, if you're an observer and you are the present moment, that there is no title, place, person, or thing. And so all bets are off. And so that's where I go down to, your emotions don't control you, you control your emotions. And people are like, oh my goodness, that sounds a little empowering. You can't possibly do that. Giving someone the idea that they have the master switch to basically do whatever they want, say whatever they want, feel whatever they want, express whatever they want. That's basically, I would say, a reflection of a Gnostic journey as opposed to a Taoist journey. Two are the same, because you need to realize that it's self-evident, and the experiential now is how you determine that. What are your thoughts on that?
It came to me as part of I would call it a Gnostic experience, or perhaps a mystical experience, that just as the Cabal creates narratives to control people, they admit that evidence which supports their narrative and exclude the rest. We throw out these gospels but keep certain gospels, or the news reader will report certain news but not other news. That we actually do the same thing to ourselves, that we have memories of things that trigger us into a state. Sad stories that from our history or from our past, that sometimes are very distorted because we only admit the evidence into our thinking that supports that sad story. So it seems to me that it's possible to rewrite all that, or to to change it, to alter it, to reinterpret it. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, you can do anything. Once you're truly 100% conscious, you can alter anything. All of a sudden, all these isms are irrelevant. You are now the monologue that you're looking for, and that means that all bets are off. There is no construct that is limited to an outcome when you are the present moment. And that is a journey for the seeker to develop a skill that actually accesses that. And it's not a figment of their imagination and all conceptual in words, all twisted up into a nice little package that they keep telling themselves over and over again, without the seed of belief and knowing that we speak of, that gnosis. And because they don't have the gnosis, it's just, empty words that just keep being repeated by a talking head that would tend to believe that I'm able to alter my story. Show me. I can take someone who's been fearful of heights for 40 years, erase their PTSD in 30 seconds, take them up to the top of the Stratosphere Hotel here in Las Vegas and throw them off, and they'll get high as a kite as if they'd been like the euphoric experience of heights was something that they loved from a childlike state. And that's how quickly it happens. And so people are caught up in it. And that, I think, is a good example of what you speak of with the story. It's a story.
It's a story, yes.
It's everything is a story.
And stories can be changed.
Stories can be altered. They can be changed. And quite frankly, the storytellers over the years would alter those stories continually. And, if we were to measure it by a psychologist, a psychotherapist, analytical neuroscientist, brain examination of what is true and what is not, that the stories of most people over their lifetime are altered to 80 to 90% of what the actual true nature of them were when they were first experienced. And that's just what happens with human beings. They're storytellers. And you get into that little seed of, what do they call it? Embellishing a little white lie here or there. And, it turns out the first evidence of it was you walked past, you met this movie star in the street, and by the time you told it you've told the same story 150 times, you're 90 years old, and you sat down and had dinner with Tom Cruise and spent the weekend with him, and it just continues. And so it's a really interesting way to also get people to understand that you can change your narrative from the dialogue to the monologue at any moment. And when you do that, you are all knowing. You are the self-evident Gnostic that we are speaking of, that is able to experience it and validate it for yourself. This is what a dear friend of the channel, Hans Wilhelm, would say. I'm either contracting or expanding. That's it. If it makes me contract, I'm walking in the other direction. If it makes me expand, I'm moving towards it. And that simplicity would come back to another friend of the channel, Tom Campbell, who would say, the glass is half empty or half full. How do you see your reality? What is the large consciousness system giving you? As he would say in his, what he would call my big toe, my theory of everything. And, again, a theory, and I like it. I resonate with a lot of it. And then perhaps some of it I don't. And that would be my knowing. And that's really what it comes down to. Your knowing, how you resonate, how it is self-evident by your experience. And then this is where I think Adrian and I are talking about, which is that's how you get to a place of true source. And within Taoism, channeling is the highest level of divination or true source. And when, I started channeling about 30 years ago, started channeling my teacher, Latsu, have been ever since. He's very present in everything that I do as a transmission. What does that really mean? Well, I could move from a dialogue to a monologue at will. What facet of the diamond am I looking at? And that's really what he's an expression of. A diamond that the Taoists would call perfection manifest. There's another facet. So you access, he's kind of like my version of what some New Age person would call the Akashic Records, the halls of Lamente or Abente or however you pronounce it. This is what we're speaking of, true source information. And how do I know it's true? Because through that expression for 30 years of my natural born life, I've probably, I wouldn't say millions, but thousands upon thousands of evidence-based experiences to validate that what I'm tapping into is 100% source at that present moment for whatever I'm doing, and it continues to repeat itself. So it's like a bellows within Taoism. You know, the Tao is like a bellows. It just contracts and expands, cracks and expands. It's never ending, whereas man is not like that. And that's the reference to the Tao Te Ching when we say, let the man know mortality is real. That is very evident by the fact that you are looking at yourself as if you are this flesh and blood. As we speak on it, as the Jade Emperor would say, when you realize you are not of this body, what can harm you? Nothing. Nothing. And that is that moment, that epiphany, that aha factor, where now you're off to the races. Now you're a conscious, spiritual conscious, for James, spiritual conscious explorer. And then we start to realize what is the true nature of reality for you. And I always remind you, your truth is the only truth you need to be concerned with. And that's it, the be all or end all. It's not my truth. It's not Adrian's truth. It's your truth. And that's why I think that you and I resonate with the very methods or delivery systems that have brought or drawn attention for us as a valid way to express ourselves and to find what it is that we're looking for, whatever that might be, something or nothing, or everything and nothing. As the Tao would say, the way to walk is not the way. The name that is named is not the name. And that, again, comes back to the fundamental understanding that you are not of this body, that you are all things. You are not limited by mortality. Mortality is real to the man. You are not the man. You are the now. You are the monologue. Just saying. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well said. Yes. Reminds me of the Matrix where Neo says, can I dodge bullets? And Morpheus says, once you know who you really are, you won't have to, because you'll be that immortal beyond this body. That happens actually at the end of the film. But during this Gnostic episode that I had, it was a very profound experience, a very I would call it an emotional experience. It was something that I don't want to talk about it too much because it's impossible to convey it. But I will say this about it. There's a verse in the Old Testament that seemed to resonate with the experience. And it was something like this: whither shall I flee from your spirit? If I ascend up to heaven, you are there. If I descend into hell, you are there. And even though I flee to the uttermost depths of the sea, even there you will lead me, your right hand will guide me, something to those. But the effect of it was a kind of an epiphany that we can't escape our true identity. We cannot escape, no matter how we feel about it. It's just is, regardless. And the Gnostics did have a concept of universal salvation where everything is reconciled, and it seemed to resonate with that.
Yeah.
That we can put ourselves through hell, but it won't really change the ultimate reality of everything. It's only our flawed perception, seeing things through the narrow chink of the cavern and not the infinity.
Well said, my friend.
and the reality coming back to us like a mirror reflecting back to us where we are. The kingdom of heaven is all around you, but you do not see it. It's sort of in the same vein, you know, it's there. It's not going away, and you can't escape it no matter what. And it really, regardless of how you feel about it or what you think about it or what emotions you have about it.
And, you know, if you're emotional, you're unconscious. It's one of the same. And that's kind of like that thing where you merge it all together and you come to that very sobering reality that none of it matters. When you are whole, nothing will bind you to this materialist, like very slow 3D density. And you'll express it through a higher resonance that will transcend all things and be the very action, the very word will be representative of what is now this present moment and what you will define as all things. That monotone, that monologue that I speak of that's it. You're not asking yourself, you are just the now. And it's not a separation, it's a liberation. It's a realization. It even goes past that scientific framing of the singular. It's much greater than that. It's above it all.
And that's when we become completely ungovernable.
Yes.
And that's when we, like, the big question is, what do we do about the cabal and all their machinations? You know, I think you're answering that.
Well, yeah. I mean, honestly, when you go into deep conversation with James about these types of things, I mean, it's quite evident that there are degrees and layers to these things that are in the system of good and evil, heaven and hell, and all things in between. And that would be reflected on a 3D reality. And, you know, 99% of people are operating there until otherwise noted. That's why it's this prophet speaking, sort of like messaging coming from a lot of, you know, mediums or channels or whatever would speak on this conscious collective raising the bar of awareness in 2024, 2025. Then it reflects back to the resonance that I was talking about, the Schumann resonance of how those hertz were raising. That resonance was raising to a state that would be evidence-based of gamma brainwaves. And so, you know, it's all sort of like merging to a point where I think profound, positive, glass half full experiences are always the same. And, you know, people ask me, they go, "Oh, how are you doing? Oh, what's going on? How do you feel today?" It's good to be me. I don't know.
There is an aspect of Gnosticism, it's more the pre-Christian version of it, that takes a rather, I would say, nihilistic turn, which I don't think is necessarily reflected in the Gospels themselves, but it has to do with one of the themes of Gnosticism, of the evil creator, the demiurge, as it's called. It has to do with the mythology where one of the eons being emanations from universal consciousness, one of them, the eon Sophia, decides to create on her own without gaining the permission of the infinite spirit. And it causes a state of chaos and confusion. And in her confusion, she gives birth to the demiurge, who is called the blind god Shamael, because he doesn't know that he doesn't know that he is not the ultimate creator. And therefore, he creates the world. And the Sethians equated the demiurge with the vengeful, angry God of the Old Testament, who, you know, I'm a jealous God and there is none other than me. And so this is the one who creates the world, and they see the world as a giant soul trap. And everything's a psyop. We're not here for any purpose. There's no meaning. There's no choice. It's just a trap of the demiurge and his created archons who keep us trapped here. So they're quite on board with the whole idea of the cabal and the wicked spirits in high places, but they don't see any meaning in their existence. And the whole idea is, when you pass to the other side, don't go to the light. It's another trap. It's another psyop. If you see Jesus, it's a psyop. The main thing is you just don't get conned into coming back here. You go back to the source. I don't think it's starting to sound like turning into a religion, a belief system that one of the things that came to me with the coincidences is that these are meaningful coincidences. They mean something, you know, and that there is a purpose for our existence. And even the bad things in the world might serve some purpose. They might be the agents of our awakening. Like I was saying about the wizard, you know, maybe he was the agent of my awakening. He was the thing that provoked me to walk out that door and take that difficult step and make that difficult decision and have the universe come down and get me through it. So I don't agree with that point of view. It's too nihilistic, a little bit too.
A little bit.
A little bit. They really go that way, you know. They really go. But I just read a verse, if I can remember it or find it. Oh yes, from the Gospel of Philip. The rulers thought they did all they did by their own power. That'd be the archons. The rulers thought they did all they did by their own power and will, but the Holy Spirit was secretly accomplishing by the Spirit's will. So they thought they were going to do evil, but the infinite Spirit had a reason for this, for a greater, higher purpose. And people have had some terrible negative experiences in life. I'm thinking of Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor was in the death camps, and he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. He was in a position where everything was taken from him. He said everything possible was taken away from him, except the ability to make a choice, the ability to choose your own state. And he's just a living, breathing example of someone who found meaning even in a place like that. Even in the darkest place, he found meaning. So I think that approach is more supported in the actual Gospels themselves. And even the concept of the demiurge, when he creates, he actually creates with the divine light that was in his mother. So he inherits the divine light of his mother, and he creates from it, but he creates it in something of a deficient way. But it's woven into the fabric of creation. Sophia, the goddess of wisdom, is part of the creation, and her divine light is part of the creation. So that's why the creation is wonderful and inspiring and healing. I have a wood lot. I like to work in the woods and do forestry work and wander through the forest. And every time I walk into the forest, I know I'm not alone, number one. and I instantly feel better. I instantly feel psychologically better. So there's obviously something good about the creation, you know. Now you might run into a grizzly bear and that's not good, but maybe it's both. And maybe the creation itself will be healed. That's part of the Gnostic mythology too, that human beings are here to liberate Sophia and help her return to her proper place and to heal the creation. So that's a little bit of the pre-Christian cosmology, as opposed to that was the Sethian version. I'm more of a Valentinian, which is in the tripartite tractate, and that's what they developed the concept of the fractal, the emanation being a fractal of the universal, individual units of consciousness.
That's definitely in line with a lot of Taoist infrastructure. And honestly, it's first we must remember to return to who you really are. Amen to that, brother.
Yes.
Well, this has been a profound conversation today. I'm really, really, really grateful for you sharing your time on the channel.
Yes, it's been wonderful. Thank you for inviting me.
And I look forward to inviting a conversation in the future sometime and revisit other facets of your diamond.
Lots more to talk about, that's for sure. And I'd really enjoy that.
Yeah, I would really enjoy that. I want to put in this podcast under it where people can find you for more insight, or do you have an email, website? You have books. What is it that you're offering the audience because they want to come and find you after this podcast?
I would just refer everyone to my blog site, and all things lead from there or go from there. You can find out a lot more about Gnosticism there. The website itself is www.aprisonforthemind.blog, not .com, but .blog. And you can comment and join the conversation in there too.
Absolutely love it, my friend. Well, again, I want to thank you for coming in and sharing your time on the podcast today. It was really brilliant. It was amazing. I'm really grateful.
Thank you. Really enjoyed it too.
And I want to thank the universe. I want to first thank you. Then I want to thank the universe for bringing you into my life. And then I want to thank the audience for sharing their time with us today. And I am your humble servant and Sifu Taoist Master San Qing. And I'll see you in the next one, guys.
Bye now.